Hello, everyone, and welcome to High on Award Season, a High on Films podcast series which explores the awards contenders as we gear up for award season, basically. I am Virat Nehru, a longtime critic and a short-time film programmer, and I'm joined by Ron Meyer from the US, who is also a fellow critic. We are the new Siskel and Ebert of our generation, giving opposable thumbs to films and movies. No, we're not. We're not.
Or
We're not
we're the
even close to Siskel and Ebert.
That's right. We're the first Meyer and Nehru. That should
Yeah,
be good
I'm
enough.
hoping that catches on eventually by the end of the podcast series. Maybe who knows? But that's a good ring to it. The first Mara and Nehru. That's a nice one. I hope. Let us know if that's the thing that you'd like to reference us as. As most critics, we're quite self-deprecating and we have low self-esteem. So if you
But
do
we're
think,
also very vain because we're going to talk at length about these subjects under the assumption that we have something worthwhile to say.
exactly, because look, honestly, let's address the elephant in the room that critics and the movies that critics like haven't been seen by the general public. So, are critics even relevant? The movies that we're going to be talking about at length in this episode and beyond in this whole series, they're not going to be successful at the box office. They never are. Most people haven't seen these movies. So, what are we even doing, Ron? Why are we even putting ourselves and our listeners through this kind of misery?
Well, that's a fair question, though I'm not sure it's one we need to be asking ourselves this year, considering that some of the top contenders are very commercially successful. Oppenheimer and Barbie, of course. We would have had Dune Part Two in mixed into this conversation, but that, of course, got delayed to 2024. The Color Purple is probably in the mix for some nominations, and that I predict will do quite well at the box office.
Yes, you're absolutely right. But I only bring this up because as many conversations I've had with people who are not critics, but I sometimes go and see movies, I'm sorry, with the general public, not just with in critic screenings, because I like to hang out with the normie crowd, because I need to have my street cred as a normal person who watches movies with my fellow friends and not just
We
other.
all know you're an elitist. You're just trying to cover it up.
Yeah, but it's not just about me, right? It's not just about me being an elitist. The problem is the Academy an elitist institution? Should we just cancel the Academy right now because it never rewards popular cinema? But maybe with Nolan in the mix with Oppenheimer, that might change because finally the movie that actually has made some money at the box office might finally get rewarded come Oscar season. So, should we just cancel the Academy if it doesn't give Nolan his due this time around because it's an elitist institution that it's just way past its expiry date? What do you think?
Well, we both know that it's not an elitist institution. I mean, this is the body that nominated Todd Phillips for Joker over. Oh, let's go back to 2019. There were definitely higher brow contenders for Best Director, and they were all passed over for, let's see, Quentin Tarantino. Not exactly a person that not exactly a filmmaker the general public finds inaccessible. I mean, we can talk about lots of times that the Academy has sort of disproven this claim, but we just keep saying over and over again that the Academy is elitist, except when they give Best Picture to something like Green Book over Roma, and then the complaint is, oh, they're too populist. So it just feels like people like to criticize the Oscars and sort of have it both ways. They've colored outside the box before. I mean, in recent years, let's just run through the list. Mad Max Fury Road, Get Out, Promising Young Woman. I mean, of course, Everything Everywhere All at Once, but maybe that is maybe that's the exception rather than the rule. But again, look at all of these other examples. Joker being one of them. I mean, Don't Look Up,
I do think Don't Look Up was kind of a mistake, but anyway, uh, we're not even arguing
But
about the
not
merits of that.
one, but not a mistake that lends itself to the charge that the Academy is elitist, right? It's like that example is more salient if you're arguing that they're too populist.
That is a fair point. And thank you for completely dousing all that energy I brought it into that charge with all my energy and rigor. And now I just feel, oh, well, that was a moot point. What is the point of that? Well, the way these episodes are going to function, we're going to pick up a popular category, which is going to be up for the awards in these episodes. For this first episode, we're going to be talking about some of our best director choices, and we're going to be running through our list. We're going to be running through some of our odds-on choices, which we think might actually make the list, with some honorable mentions. And then, just for fun, because we are critics and we're irrelevant, we're going to run through our irrelevant list, which is our slim chances, which we definitely know for a fact will not get up. But if we were in charge of the world, that would be our wish list of directors who we would like to get nominated. We know they're not going to be probably get nominated because they're so outside and it's such a rare possibility, but we're going to play this game anyway. So that's how this episode is going to run. It's going to be a bit of reality and a bit of fiction, just how kind of life, right? You know, mixing fact with fiction and coloring outside the lines, just like the Academy has done. So look at that, everything comes back a full circle. So coming back to Nolan and Oppenheimer, is Nolan locked for the win? Should we even have a ceremony? Should it be like a crowning ceremony? Finally give Nolan his Best Director award, and that's it. It's all done. Should we just fast forward to the inevitable?
Definitely feels like Nolan is the consensus pick, even though we haven't even had any critical precursors yet. However, I have I have a good feeling about the runner-up, and
Uh-huh.
maybe we'll keep that name close to the chest until we really dive into this conversation. But listeners who pay serious attention to award season probably know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, they might, but let's stick with Nolan for a second. And I say that this is going to be a crowning ceremony because a lot of people, Oppenheimer is a popular choice. A lot of people have seen Oppenheimer, uh, and Nolan is that rare breed of commercial director who is loved by the critics and by uh, I don't want to say the popular masses, but I am going to say the popular masses as well. So he has critical and commercial appeal. So it's that, you know, beautiful cross section and crossover, which not a lot of directors have. And it would be nice, I think, for a Best Director winner for a film that has been seen by a lot of people and they can get behind that because that is the complaint year on year that the Best Picture or Best Director winner, well, I haven't even seen the film. And most people that end up going to see the film after the award season to see what the fuss was about or what the why this film actually won the award that it won. But if Oppenheimer and Nolan wins Best Director, then, it's like, oh, well, I've seen the film and I could predict the Best Director back when I saw the film. And it's a validation for the moviegoer that, oh, back when I saw the film, I could pick my Best Director already. And I'm glad the Academy agrees with me because finally, both of us, my commercial perception of movies and the critical pick is on the same page.
Oppenheimer is, let me back up for a moment. I'm sure the Academy has just been waiting for an opportunity to give Nolan an Oscar. I think this isn't a controversial opinion. He's probably the most influential director. I'm not saying he's the best director of the 21st century, but what filmmaker has really left a greater mark? Um, like you said, he's sort of that rare filmmaker who is beloved by both critics and popular audiences. Um, and but for the longest time, Nolan has kind of dabbled in sci-fi and maybe films that I don't know, the Academy was slow to recognize. But when he aligns his interests with the Academy's, they do respond. Um, I mean, really, like, not only then because Inception was so successful at the Oscars, but look at what it took for him to get his first directing nomination. Dunkirk, a World War II film, right? It kind of reminds me of like Steven Spielberg's trajectory, even though Spielberg, I think, got his first nomination for Close Encounters, but he was really sort of embraced by the Academy for Schindler's List, and then again for Saving Private Ryan. And I guess this is kind of the same thing. You have a popular director known for blockbusters who kind of hunkers down and makes this sort of respectable prestige film. And then for those films, they go on the sort of ride that we're seeing Nolan take now. He is getting a director campaign that is befitting of a movie star. Like usually when we see someone who's just all over the place, constantly being covered and, lavish with these headlines, that's usually the kind of push we see for, a favored actor. But because Nolan is such a brand name, he has the clout kind of command that celebrity.
No, I agree with you. Now, this is the interesting bit. We have presumed that Nolan, it's almost, a given that Nolan's going to win, but one person might play a bit of a small sport in this party. From people who have seen the film already and they like its chances quite a lot, it's Yorgos Lanthimos. He's back again with a new film, Poor Things, starring with his favorite muse, Emma Stone. And that might be the critical artsy darling option to Nolan's kind of appealing blockbuster style cinema. And it's a natural, I guess, adversarial narrative. It's the Federer Nadal kind of thing happening here. It's like you have two very different choices from two different brands of cinema as to how people see it, but they might not be that different in that sense. And there is the perception that Lanthimos has been the indie artsy darling, but is he? Or has he been? Is that a misconception or mischaracterization of his style of cinema?
It's not a. I don't think it mischaracterizes his style of cinema. I do think it mischaracterizes this particular film, though. When more people see Poor Things, I think they're going to realize that it's quite accessible. This is not The Lobster or The Killing of a Sacred Deer. This isn't even The Favorite. This is a very palatable film that voters are already going to be primed for, at least thematically, because of Barbie, presuming that movie is actually going to be Barbie, I mean, is going to be this massive awards play for Warner Brothers. Yeah, I don't think it's fair to say that Oppenheimer and Poor Things are the, blockbuster and indie artsy darling of the season. Poor Things, I predict, will be very, very commercially successful. And both movies are viewed as massive technical achievements, which is why I don't quite like this perspective that I've read or heard a couple times that they're going to split, that maybe Poor Things will win picture but Oppenheimer will win director, or vice versa, that Lanthimos will win director and Oppenheimer will win picture. Because when we see that kind of director picture split, it's usually between some, a sort of technically rigorous kind of like cerebral achievement, and a more like down the middle crowd pleaser, or something, not necessarily a crowd pleaser, but something that is just of a smaller, more intimate scale. So the splits I'm talking about, Iñárritu winning in 2015 for The Revenant, while Spotlight wins Best Picture. La La Land winning for director the following year, while Moonlight wins picture. Uh, Roma winning director and Green Book taking picture. Or most recently, Jane Campion taking Best Director for The Power of the Dog, and picture going to Coda. You you can't really. That's just not the kind of competition that would be brewing between these two films.
Yeah, I mean, surely as and when the different awards get handed out in the lead up to the Oscars, we might revisit this conversation and see who's actually emerging as clear favorites in the field and things like that. But clearly, I think Lanthimos versus Nolan is going to be what we both of us believe the kind of hot topic in terms of best director race, unless of course Gerwig comes and just wins all of it, and then it's egg on both of our faces for Barbie. So,
Well, if Gerwig were to emerge, I don't think she would be the consensus at all. I don't think like that would be. I think she would have to be a very late breaker, because I don't see all of the precursors lining up for her. In fact, while we're on that topic, a lot of people have kind of decided that Nolan is, this year's Chloe Zhao or Jane Campion, and that they're just going to sweep the season. And I guess we'll have a better handle on whether or not that's the case after NYFC, the New York Film Critics Circle, announces their picks. But, a year ago, because as prognosticators, we too often make the mistake of trying to predict the current season as if it's a carbon copy of the previous one. In 2022, a lot of people were saying, oh, well, maybe Steven Spielberg is this year's Chloe Zhao / Jane Campion for The Fablemans. And we kept saying that even after it clearly wasn't the case, because SS Rajamouli won NYFCC for RRR, which to me didn't signal that he was an Oscar contender. It simply told me, oh, there isn't a consensus. It's still anyone's game. Because if you remember in 2020 and 2021, Zhao and Campion pretty much swept. But if and these precursors, sure, they like to, have their own kind of, they like to march to the beat of their own drum. But at the same time, when there is an overwhelming consensus, we've seen them fall into line. And if they didn't, and they didn't do it for Spielberg, and we don't know yet if they're going to do it for Nolan. I guess we'll see shortly. I'm really curious to see on nominations morning whether Oppenheimer gets a Best Cinematography nomination. Now, some of our listeners may think, well, of course, it's like the favorite to win cinematography. And I did just say we shouldn't predict the current season as though it's a carbon copy of the previous one. But I'm going to risk making that mistake. A year ago, Claudio Miranda for Top Gun Maverick was far and away the favorite to win Best Cinematography, but he wasn't even nominated. And I'm not bringing this up entirely randomly. I did just list a bunch of picture director splits between a technical achievement and something of a smaller scale. One example of director and picture actually splitting between two technical achievements is 2013, when Alfonso Cuarón won for Gravity, but 12 Years a Slave won picture. Now, I think the public perceives both to be these massive technical achievements, but you can kind of tell that maybe the Academy didn't feel that way because 12 Years a Slave, though it certainly deserved one, did not get a Best Cinematography nomination. And I guess I'm curious to see if Hoyt van Hoytema misses out for Oppenheimer, and in that case, actually, then I can see I can see a picture director split between Poor Things and Oppenheimer, but I think Oppenheimer would in that case take picture and Lanthimos would take director. So again, I'm not sure if I phrased it quite this way, but I can see Oppenheimer or Poor Things just taking director and Best Picture going to something like The Holdovers or American Fiction or maybe even Past Lives, though that seems to be a remote possibility. But I don't see them splitting between themselves unless, again, we see a repeat of the 2013-2014 season in which these two perceived technical juggernauts split director and picture, and one of them isn't nominated in cinematography. I know that that was very rambly, and I have been kind of toying with this idea for a while, so I'm not sure I articulated it in the clearest way possible. But yeah, that's sort of my take.
You were listening to the very first episode of the High on Award season, a High on Films podcast series, alternative title, The Feeling That the Time for Film Criticism Has Passed. So now it's time for our odds on top 5 best director list. This is basically the 5 directors that we think definitely might get nominated. So Ron, who are your top 5 people who have made the cut? Who has been brutally cut out? We'll get to the honorable mentions later, but just your top 5 people who definitely you think will make the cut.
Yeah, I'm sure our top 3 is identical. In first place, I have Nolan. Again, just because the sentiment really seems to be on his side, but I'm not prepared to crown him this year's Chloe Zhao or Jane Campion just yet. In second place, of course, as our listeners might suspect, based on the rant I just concluded, I have Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things. In third place, I have Martin Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon. In fourth, I'm gonna switch it up here. Initially I had I'm gonna switch my 4 and 5.
Yeah.
In 4, I'll say Alexander Payne for The Holdovers, and my fifth spot goes to Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest. Now, of course, as we, get into 4 and 5, those are picks we're less confident in because they're not sure things. So our lists in the top 3 are likely going to be identical, but as we work our way down, that's where the discrepancies will arise.
No, you're absolutely correct, Ron, because my top 3 are exactly the same as you. Number 1, Nolan for Oppenheimer. Number 2, Lanthimos for Poor Things. And on number 3, Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon. Even though I don't think Killers of the Flower Moon is that exceptional an achievement in directing, I do think Scorsese is too big a name to pass up. I do think he will make the cut. Now, number 4 and 5 are my very interesting picks. I have kind of gone out on a limb, mainly because if the one A24 film in terms of direction, which I think A24 will back if they had to pick between Glazer for Zone of Interest and Past Lives with Celine Song, I think they're going to campaign harder for Past Lives and Celine Song because of how accessible that film is over Zone of Interest. And also because I do think for a debut film, Past Lives is kind of a real achievement. I do truly feel that. I don't think a debut filmmaker has had such an impact for a long, long time in terms of when I look back at the first half of the year, that was...
I can name a couple.
I mean, that was all people
Jordan
were talking
Peele,
about.
Emerald Fennell.
I
to
mean,
name
I just
two.
I just want to stab myself a little when you say Emerald Fennell because that was just a that was just a huge
Yes,
dagger through my critical heart there. But
just to give our listeners some insight, Virat is not a Saltburn fan. Neither am I,
neither are
but
you, though.
I do think Fennell is. No, I'm not, but I do think Fennell is just she's going to be remembered as one of the most influential filmmakers to emerge from this era, along with Jordan Peele and Damien Chazelle, the Safdie brothers, Ari
Maybe,
Aster.
maybe, but another thing I do have against Fennell is she's running the most atrocious Oscar campaign in how arrogant it is, as if I'm here to provoke people, and it's just this provocateur style campaign that, oh, that's it. Of course, the film was meant to provoke you, and if you don't get it, well, the joke is on you, kind of thing. And I don't like when filmmakers have this holier than thou attitude, as if they're here to provoke their audiences, and if the audiences don't accept it or buy into that, then it's their loss. Well, humility, woe is me. So I don't know. I, I don't know. There's something about Fennell's Oscar campaign right now that just completely kind of, frustrates me.
Well, we don't have to worry about her getting in for her sophomore feature. I think Saltburn, it's a contender, but it's on the outside looking in. And if I were to make, a top 10, a list of the top 10 likeliest directors to nab a nomination, I'm not even sure Fennell would be on it for, again, just for this movie.
I hope you're proven right and all your dreams come true. Ron, thank you so much for that one. Okay, coming back to my list. So, number 4, I've picked the other A24 film, Celine Song, for her debut film, Past Lives. I really do think first half of the year, that's all people were talking about, as if it's the best film of the year. Obviously, as more
Definitely.
reactions came in, that kind of sort of, evened out a bit. But I still think it is a massive achievement. And on number 5, rounding out my top 5, probably my ballsiest pick, Cord Jefferson gets in for American Fiction. A film that I really love, and I think it's exceptionally well directed. More importantly, I think it's picking up momentum in the Oscar campaign at the right time. Jeffrey Wright is everywhere, kind of doing his thing, and I think it has a really, really strong chance of actually getting in. May not be
I
for
wish
the
Jeffrey
director.
Wright had some, like, I really wish Jeffrey Wright had a chance in the supporting actor field for Rustin. He has this one line in Rustin in like the first maybe 10, 15 minutes of the movie that just cracks me up. I'm not going to spoil it. We'll talk about it off air.
Rustin, starring Coleman Domingo in an amazing, amazing performance. It's out on Netflix. All of you can go and watch it. It's a wonderful, wonderful film. It's a film that actually does some interesting things with the biopic genre in terms of how it's put together. It's not your run-of-the-mill biopic. I think it's
Even
more
though critics
really.
are underselling it as that, they're just calling it a mediocre film that serves as a showcase for Coleman Domingo, and I really disagree.
I disagree too. I think it's more interestingly directed for the genre template that it's following. It's not your tick the boxes. I've just set it up as a biopic. It's got a real energy to it, which has that sort of set piece action beats, which I wouldn't expect from the genre that it's following. So it's really interesting, and an outside chance for best director if the stars align. But I'm sure he's on your honorable mentions list, Ron, which we will get to now.
No, George C. Wolfe isn't on my honorable mentions. He's just relegated to being on my wish list. I don't think the movie has really any. Unfortunately, I think it has a great script. It's really well edited. I like the cinematography. I think Chris Rock and Jeffrey Wright delivers stellar supporting work. But yeah, outside of best lead actor for Domingo, I don't see the movie being a contender.
Okay, we will get to our acting performances and categories in our
Of
next
course.
episode, which is episode 2. But right now, we're sticking with our best director nominations. We've run through our odds-on favorites, the ones we think will get through our top 5. Now it's time for our honorable mentions, directors that we think have an outside chance, but a realistic possibility of definitely making the one of the 2 spots. I think the 4th and the 5th spot, because those are the 2 spots which we've taken a gamble on. So I've got
The
5.
top 3 is pretty locked in.
I think so. The top 3 is pretty locked in. But if 2 spots are worth fighting for, I think that's a fair chance. And I've got 5 people here who might actually give it a shot in terms of fighting for those 4th and 5th spots. First up, we have Bradley Cooper returning to directing, which, I mean, as soon as I say that, I'm tired because I just feel like part of my brain is like, why? But part of my brain is like, of course he is. It's like, ugh. But anyway, Bradley Cooper for Maestro. Once again, another insufferable Oscar campaign, which is all about, I put in so much effort to make this movie. I don't like the fact when campaigns use the shtick about the effort you put in to make a movie automatically makes you deserving of a nomination because you put in X amount of effort to make a film, or you took X amount of time to make a film. I think he had an outside shot, and I would not be surprised if he snapped up the 4th or 5th spot in terms of best director.
Me neither. And he's also on my honorable mentions. And I mean, yeah, going on a press tour and saying you put in a lot of work. I mean, it's probably a wiser strategy than just saying, I phoned it in. But
but the
I
thing is,
agree. It is a little
which
tiring.
director would put up their hand and say, I didn't put in work for my movie? You know what? It was all right. I didn't want to put in any work for this. I mean, isn't it obvious that if you've made a film and it's your baby, you would obviously want to claim that you've put in work for it? Anyway.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's one aspect of awards season. Lots of people just kind of going through the motions and saying very obvious things as though they're novel. But, I mean, we love the season because of the movies that come out, and we love the horse race. The other side of it, is this. It's celebrities kind of preening for our love and, talking about the how they suffered for the work.
I mean, it depends, it's all about perspective, whether the filmmaker suffered for their art or the audiences suffered while watching their film. Suffering is
Yeah.
always a matter of perspective, but it's okay. So that's
um
for the number.
yes, we both have them in our honorable
Yeah.
mentions. I'm guessing we also both have Greta Gerwig for Barbie.
Yes,
Not
we
just because of how successful the movie is. Honestly, if we were just looking at the movie, I would think, okay, maybe it's kind of like, I don't know, like a Top Gun Maverick or something. Like, yes, it's going to be a major Oscar play, but it's not really seen like, the director isn't the face of the movie. But like, Christopher Nolan, she is a brand name director and she's already part of the club. She got a nomination for Lady Bird, and even though she didn't get a directing nomination for Little Women in 2019, that was still, nominated for Best Picture, Screenplay. It got a couple of acting noms.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. Gerwig, definitely, I wouldn't even say an outside chance, a very realistic chance to
Yeah.
grab the top
If
spot.
anything, I'd say she's probably even likelier than well, I don't know if she's likelier than Cooper.
Cooper and Gerwig, out of our sort of honorable mentions, have more of a shot than anybody else on at least my list from the rest of the honorable
Sure.
mentions. They have a more of a realistic chance to grab that 4th and 5th spot. And Song and Jefferson from my list can easily be replaced by Cooper and Gerwig. So
Yeah, I have some trouble seeing Celine's song break into. I know she was a popular pick for a while. And actually, going back to something you said, I don't think it's that more people have seen past lives and the enthusiasm has waned. I think it's just so many of the fall festival titles, had successful launches. So it's not that people don't like past lives anymore. It's just that all of these, it's unlike in 2022 where we saw a lot of contenders kind of fall after their festival premieres. This year, most of them have kind of assumed the position that many of us thought they would, and so there haven't been as many disappointments. And I would think that song is just getting crowded out, not so much that the movie itself is kind of lagging because a wider audience has seen it. From what I hear, people are still responding to it. It's just the field has gotten a lot more crowded.
I think you may have a fair point. Also, I think A24 is pushing the acting categories to Greta Lee stronger and more sort of vehemently than direction for Celine Song for that film. So it may come down to what kind of campaign they're running and which categories they're focusing on, which doesn't take away from the achievement that Celine Song has done with Past Lives. As a debut film, I do think it was kind of exceptional, which is one of the main reasons why I put it up there. If the Academy can recognize a debut director, and in that kind of a film as a breakout film, once again, not that it hasn't done it before, if it can recognize it again, this is another chance to do so. See, we have to always mentally correct ourselves so we don't fall into the same pitfalls that other people do when it comes to the narrative. So I have that. I have a common. I've Glazer, who you have in your odds-on favorite in my honorable mentions. Yes. So Glazer was on your.
Love to see that nomination. I mean, the zone of interest is an achievement.
I do agree with that. It is. I still think it is not as accessible. So my reason to picking Song over Glazer was that A24 would pick an accessible option with Past.
But keep in mind, the directing branch is highbrow, right? They may go for someone like Glazer, a cold kind of cerebral vision like that. Actually, a good time to bring up. I think Glazer is such an interesting contender because he's kind of a composite of two types of directing nominees we've seen maybe over the past decade. So he's like, he is both your kind of internationally backed auteur, your like Thomas Vinterberg or Hamaguchi or Pavel Pawlikowski. And, of course, Pavel Pawlikowski's Cold War is relevant to this conversation because Cold War and the Zone of Interest share Lucas Zoll as a cinematographer. So Glazer has that going for him. He might be the arty international pick of the year, but he is also kind of like the Bennett Miller, Jane Campion, Todd Field of this year. Someone who takes long pauses between movies and then just comes back with this like, very cold, austere kind of like technically precise art house masterpiece.
Yeah. No, that is definitely a possibility. Now, I do have someone, I know you're going to love this, Ron, because you did love Mank. Because I do
I know where we're going with this. Are we going to talk about how the killer is a metaphor for this misfire that isn't actually a misfire? Mank is a masterpiece, first of all. Possibly my pick for the best movie of the decade so far. I love Mank and I will defend it until my dying day. But also, it's not a misfire. I mean, like, how can a movie that got a best picture, director, lead actor, supporting actress, a pretty sure production design, score, one cinematography for Eric Messerschmidt. I'm sure I'm forgetting some other category that it appeared in. I know it did not get a screenplay nom, but it's like, how can you claim that fine, maybe like with audiences it was a misfire, but no, the Academy definitely liked it. In fact, that's the kind of Fincher the Academy likes, right? They don't nominate him for directing Gone Girl and the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Similarly, I don't see The Killer being a play in this category. But yeah, Mank, that's the Fincher they like. So anyone who says that the Killer is his apology for Mank, like, I have a beef with you on two fronts. One, I just think you're like wrong because Mank is an amazing movie. Two, the Academy definitely did not feel that Mank was a misfire.
If you guys haven't guessed already, my next name that was going to come out of my mouth was going to be David Fincher as an honorable mention for my
Sorry for taking the steam out of your
for
announcement
my
there.
best director choices and honorable mention. I do think his well, now that you've specified that Killer is not his comeback, because there was never a comeback to begin with. I
There
do.
was never any failure to come back from.
There we go.
Mank is an absolutely incredible saga of like you know what? Let me shut up. I can talk about Mank for hours. Get back to your honorable
But
mentions.
that's okay. But you do make a salient point, which is the success of Mank sort of gives me hope that maybe Fincher is in the directing conversation because the Academy does love Fincher. And The Killer it's a cold, detached film by design. Once again, another formalist film, much like Glazer's Zone of Interest, by design. So you have, in that sense, Glazer and Fincher share that similarity. Nothing else, very different films otherwise. But in terms of the formalist approach towards filmmaking, and one of the things Fincher doesn't get a lot of credit for is the kind of very seamless VFX and CGI that he uses in his films, and in The Killer there is a lot of that. So one of the beautiful ways that VFX and CGI are blended in The Killer, which you barely notice. I don't think people even notice how Fincher is so adept at using VFX and CGI. That's, I think, if you're going to use CGI, Fincher is such a beautiful template in how you can use CGI in a really good way. So one of the things I really appreciated about The Killer was that VFX and CGI work, which barely gets noticed in a Fincher film, which is, I think, how CGI and VFX should be.
I noticed it. I felt that the backdrops looked very, artificial.
Yeah,
In
but
fact,
I
I
mean,
think that in Zodiac, he did it a lot more successfully, and that movie came out in 2007. But yeah, that's neither here nor there.
the other sort of directing option I've got here, once again from past pedigree, is Todd Haynes for May December. Once again, a very outside chance, but I do think a realistic one. We shall see. It's coming out on Netflix soon. A lot of more audiences can see it. They can make up their own mind. I think once again they're pushing more for the acting categories with Melton, especially even Julianne
They
Moore.
just released a whole featurette like focused on Melton. They know that Twitter and critics love that performance.
And to be honest, even the film's perspective is very much sort of centering around Melton. Melton is emerges in terms of the film's perspective, really the most hard done by character in terms of how that arc is set up. So the film also positions Melton to be, the audience's kind of moral compass, essentially. So in that sense, that would be fine. But Todd Haynes for May December rounds up my honorables mention list. Any other names that you have, Ron, which are different to mine in your honorable mentions that I've missed?
No, so we both have Cooper, we both have Gerwig. I don't think Haynes is a bad pick for, again, just for an honorable mention list. again, he's someone who's perceived as being overdue for Academy recognition. Toying with.
I don't have any love for Alexander Payne for The Holdovers or Andrew Haigh for, you know, the Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal film, the title of which I'm completely forgetting.
All of Us Strangers.
Thank you. Yes.
Well, I just interviewed the cinematographer of that film, so I guess it's fresh in my mind.
What I meant to say was I have so much love for this film, and
yeah.
I have so much love that I completely forgot how much I love this film, and now that's why I'm completely, overlooked in the directing category, and I should never make that mistake again. So yeah, sorry about that. Anyone from the team?
In case any Searchlight publicists are listening,
This,
I do like the film, which is why I kind of went out of my way and wanted to speak with some of the artists who worked on it. I don't think Andrew Haigh is a realistic possibility, but maybe he's someone I would put in an honorable mentions slot. I mean, I can see the film taking off. It's just it's being released so late in the year, but that may end up working in its favor. I don't really see I did at one point think that Ridley Scott would be a possibility, but after reading the reactions to Napoleon and seeing the movie myself, I just don't think that's, unfortunately. I mean, Ridley Scott was heavily predicted for a nomination in 2015 when The Martian was released. He's one of our most versatile and prolific filmmakers, but I don't think Napoleon is his ticket back.
Yeah, no, it's sorry, Mr. Ridiculous Scott. I mean, sorry, Ridley Scott. Sorry, that's right. I don't think lucky for you, but you did make a pretty ridiculous movie from the reaction.
You know what Ridley would say to that, right?
No,
some variation of "fuck off," which is what which is his response to pretty much every criticism.
Fair enough. I mean, we're not even relevant, so who even listens to the show? So it's not like
if he can tell a historian to fuck off, then yeah, we're definitely on his shit list. Well, no, not us. That's narcissistic. I mean, people like us, people in our field of work.
If his response is, "How did you pick Joaquin Phoenix to be Napoleon?" I looked at a photo of him, and then he put on that ridiculous Napoleon hat, and I'm like, "There is my guy." Then I think that's like chef's kiss filmmaking right there. So it's okay. Anyway, so that rounds up our honorable mentions and our odds-on choices. Now we get to the fun bit, which is our wish list category for Best Director nominations. These are people which we 99.9% think will definitely not make it, but if the world was our oyster, which it is, and it is up to us as critics to make a list. These are the
It is on this podcast.
It is on this podcast because it is High on Award Season, a High on Film Series podcast series, first episode, which is all about best directors. These are our slim chances, the slimmest of slim in 0.0001%. This is our list of people who will not make it, but we get to decide. So this is, a blank canvas thing. So I've got some names here, which you will hear and you will start tearing your hair out because you're like, what is wrong with you, Virat? And number one to start out that list is Miyazaki with The Boy and the Heron, which I know you've seen. And obviously, I have a soft spot because, look, if Miyazaki feels this is his last movie and he cannot, for the life of him, just retire and he just keeps coming back for one more film, then why not? Why not? Why not? I mean,
I think he said that he already has a new project in the works, but yeah, there's, as long as it's not happening.
It's not
I guess
happening.
we can talk about the love for Hayao Miyazaki, but
yes, I mean I love Miyazaki. It's not happening, but this is my list. So now it is happening in this alternate reality, in this multiverse of madness that we're living in. in the feeling that the time for criticism has passed. In this reality, this is the list. So this is
And
that.
why are we saying that the time for criticism has passed? Because you really like a movie by debut filmmaker Joanna Arnow called The Feeling That the Time for Doing Something Has Passed.
Thank you for finally clearing up that really sort of running gag for the entire episode, which I thought I was never going to reveal, and that people had to look up why he keeps making that joke, and finally stumble upon this wonderful title of a film, which I do think I know you have mixed feelings about it, Ron, but I did think it was kind of beautiful and really funny. I think it's one of the funniest films that I've seen all year, and it is such an interesting corollary to another film, Fallen Leaves, how from Aki Kaurismäki, how they take the same premise and they operate in two very different directions. So I've got both Aki Kaurismäki's Fallen Leaves on my list of slim chances. It's been a critic's darling all throughout, critics' jury at Cannes. Uh, it's been so beloved. Will be out in movie soon, and I've got Joanna Arnow's debut film, the feeling that the time for doing something has passed. Wow, that title is really mouthful and supposed to give you a depressing sort of feeling, which the film does as well. It's interesting how one film, Kaurismäki's Fallen Leaves, goes through a completely hopeful outlook, and then this one goes to a completely bleak and hopeless outlook from the same emerging point. But yeah,
That's a really good way to compare and contrast those films.
I know, and I think because of that reason, I do believe both films are worth seeing, regardless of how you personally feel about them after you've seen it. I think both films engage with present millennial anxieties and present kind of structural anxieties of living in the world today in a very realistic way, which I think a lot of films are not doing. I thought, regardless of the problems within the films, I think their ambitions were right. And I do think because of that, I'd rather the people see it and then make up their mind rather than me saying whether the film is good or bad. Sometimes it's easier for me to recommend a film because I want people to engage with it rather than just say, don't watch it. So that's that. Now, I've got a film here in my slim chances, which I know you love. And if it were up to you, that would be like the top of your list. It's Ira Sachs' Passages. I also love the film, but also I know, much like you, that Ira Sachs has for some reason never crossed over. I don't know why, but um, this is still
His brand of humanism just like you can call the Academy elitist or populist. One thing they're definitely not. They Ira Sachs just he doesn't make those like baity films. He's a very kind of quiet, passive observer of the human condition. Even though I do think Passages has quite a few moments that, I guess you can argue are sensational. I mean, particularly the final scene when he walks into a goth's classroom. In fact, I've seen the movie a couple of times with different crowds, and there are moments that have gotten like loud, like audible reactions at pretty much each screening. But yeah, no, I don't think Ira Sachs is maybe like an indie spirit nom or something. But no, of course he is a complete impossibility as far as the Oscars are concerned. Unfortunately, I mean, I think Passages is if not my favorite, then my second favorite movie of the year.
There we go. And for our listeners, you can actually watch Passages on Mubi right now. It's actually available to watch and stream. So if you have a Mubi subscription, you can watch it, and we would definitely highly recommend the film. Regardless of our personal affinities, I do think it has a wonderful performance, wonderfully narcissistic performance by Franz Rogowski, and very, very ably supported by Ben Whishaw, who I think
I think Ben Whishaw would be a great supporting actor nominee.
Yes, I
Not
think
going to
Wisho
happen, but
has been overlooked for a long, long time. I first fell in love with Wisho when he played uh, the kind of supporting lead in a quiet film called Lilting, where his partner passes away in an accident, and he has to convey that news to his family, and they are in a same-sex relationship, and his family doesn't know that they were, and it's this quiet, beautiful film, uh, which is about sharing grief in a very personal way. It's a beautiful film. It's a beautiful performance by Wisho. And if people haven't seen that film, Lilting, I would highly, highly recommend people go back and watch that film.
I haven't seen it, but you've actually gotten me quite interested. I'm looking it up now. Yes, 2014. I
Yes.
may check it out.
Yeah, no, highly recommended. It's also one of Wisho's most understated performances. There's barely any dialogue there because obviously the family is from a different culturally, linguistically diverse background. So a lot of the film is played with silences and an interpretation of what they're trying to say, but they don't have the language to convey that grief. It's a very interesting film that way about that kind of nonverbal, subdued acting, conveying so much through silences and sort of the spaces in between dialogue, because the dialogue doesn't do justice to the kind of grief that these characters are feeling, and they can't convey it to the other person.
Ben Whishaw is in the Viola Davis Hall of Fame for not crying.
Yes,
There is
yeah,
a
yeah,
moment in Passages where his nose is just like, profusely running.
yeah. I
And
mean,
it's hard not to think of
Viola Davis,
Viola Davis's many crying scenes.
Viola Davis, Ben Whishaw, Carey Mulligan, who I think is an excellent crier on screen. If there was like an Oscar just for crying, I think she has excelled in being woe is me and misery on screen so well, which I don't think that should be a typecast thing, but she does it so well that I secretly wish in every film there is one crying Carey Mulligan scene, which if she's there in the film,
A
which
lot of Carey Mulligan crying in Maestro.
yes, good on you, Bradley Cooper. No, I think you've got it in just based on that. I think you've sealed your top 5 spot based on that choice. You at least know your actors pretty well. So that's Ira Sachs for Passages. Some of the other choices that I do have are also interesting in the sense I've got Chloe Dumont for Fair Play, another
So do I.
really
She'd be on
interesting
my wish
film,
list.
a really interesting film, really gone under the radar. I think it's one of the best. If we're talking about debut films, you have Past Lives of Celine Song, Fair Play, Chloe Dumont, such
Both
an
Sundance
accomplishment.
titles.
Yeah, such an accomplishment for a debut filmmaker. I think it deserves a watch. It's on Netflix right now. Haven't seen it. Unequivocally go and watch it, but also deserves the Best Director nomination if it's up to me.
So
So
entertaining. And I would give uh Phoebe Dynevor, not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Alden Ehrenreich acting nominations. They're I mean, there are just moments from that movie that are like etched in my mind that I love kind of like impersonating whenever I'm bored. I mean, yeah, they both go to some really crazy places and they both have fantastic line readings. And Eddie Marson is also a lot of fun in that movie. But yes, just from a filmmaking standpoint, I think Chloe Dumont does a great job. I think her debut is far more impressive than Celine's song. Sorry, than Celine's songs. And yeah, it just had a great like visual like grit and urgency to it. I'm not sure how I don't know, it just reminded me of like the cinematography of like Michael Ballhaus, the Goodfellas cinematographer. Yeah, there was just this kind of like it was artful without the being without drawing too much attention to its craft, if that makes any sense. I mean, there's so much cinematography that we appreciate that is, I mean, what I'm saying is pretty basic. It's like there's directing that is impressive, that is also showy, and then there's impressive directing that doesn't call attention to itself. And I think Dumont's work falls into the latter category. And she, like I said, she would also be on my wish list. I think Fair Play is one of the best directed movies of the year.
Yep. So fair play to her. There we go. That's our pun of the day.
Ha.
Out of the way. So that's Fair Play from Chloe Dumont, which is on Netflix right now. If you haven't seen it, highly, highly recommend that you go and watch it. So actually, yeah, quite a lot of films are already out on Netflix at the moment that you can watch. There's Rustin, which is obviously the film that we talked about previously, on Netflix at the moment. There is also Fair Play from Chloe Dumont, which is currently out there. There's Passages from Ira Sachs out on Mubi at the moment. So
The Killer is on Netflix.
The Killer is on Netflix. So people who say, all these awards contention films are not accessible, they're there for you to see. Go and watch them and make up your own mind.
Well, I mean, more importantly, it's not just that you can easily watch them, it's that they're not actually hold inaccessible movie. I mean, like Fair Play, I think again, it's not even really an awards contender, but it is, it did well with critics, and it's not some kind of like sort of heady, and it's extremely entertaining, I think, for casual viewers and, cinephiles like us.
Yeah. Past Lives is on Apple TV. Killers of the Flower Moon is going to be on Apple TV very soon. So, it's all happening. Most of these titles will be accessible very, very soon if they're not already. Some of the other titles on my wish list are The Old Oak by Ken Loach. If this is his final film, I do think if there is one film that encapsulates everything that Ken Loach is about and his brand of filmmaking and his politics, The Old Oak is such a nice encapsulation of all of it. And it's also really beautiful in the sense that it is, once again, a quiet minimalist film talking about contemporary issues in a very clear-headed way. If this is his last film, kudos to that. Just for that sentimentality alone, I would want him to be up there because I think Loach deserves to be recognized. He's been making his kind of films for a long, long time, and he hasn't received much love for it. I think it's time, if this is finally his last film, that he deserves some recognition for it. So I do have a very soft spot for The Old Oak, and it's also a very beautiful film. Talking about old masters returning, I also have Perfect Days by Wim Wenders. After the highs of Paris, Texas, and Wings of Desire, it's good to see Wim Wenders coming back to form, truly, truly back to form.
It actually would have been a pretty good honorable mention. He's not, an impossibility. And by the way, that just reminded me, one honorable mention we didn't honorably mention, Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, I pushed her down to my sort of slim chances list because the more I looked at my honorable mentions, I thought those people had a stronger chance than Justine Triet, but I may be wrong. Looking at the Oscar campaign of Anatomy of a Fall, and Sandra Hüller specifically, because with Zone of Interest as well, she's crossed over in a big, big way. Maybe that benefits Justine Triet in terms of her visibility as well. I know it won the Palm, but I just don't see that kind of tight-knit courtroom drama really appealing to Academy voters and also audiences in that way, where we can see directing prowess, if you know what I mean, because it's such a locked room mystery kind of drama.
Definitely feels like a film that rides more on its screenplay than its direction.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
People in this space do really love Triet's work. I don't
and a lot of people do conflate
agree.
Good directing with a good screenplay. It's always been the case where if you do have a strong screenplay, people mistake that for, oh, it's well directed. Has happened. So, that there is that possibility. But I do think it has a stronger chance in the best original screenplay category. Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that's definitely where I would put my money. The other sort of contenders I have is some of the crazier
Well,
choices.
not contenders, but yeah,
Sorry,
just
in my
people
wish
we
list,
would like to see.
some of the wish list contenders. I mean, not even contending; they're contending in this alternate reality. This is not the real Oscars. This is the fake make believe Oscars that we have made up. Is Christoph Bogley for Dream Scenario, the new Nicolas Cage movie, in the most Nicolas Cage performance this year. Not even, in the recent past. I would say Mandy is the most Nicolas Cage performance in the recent past. But this year, I would say Dream Scenario comes really close, mainly because I also love his previous film, Sick of Myself. And I think with Dream Scenario, he's really made one of the most funniest films, much like Arno did with The Feeling That the Time for Doing Something Has Passed. Much like that, Dream Scenario is also a deliberately laugh out loud, funny, and bleak film. It is tapping into something which is very much about contemporary anxiety and using black humor as a crutch to convey a lot of that. And I think, especially appealing to the meme culture that we have today, there's going to be a lot of memes coming out of that film, much like a lot of memes came out of Mandy. A lot of memes are going to come out of this film as well. So I'm waiting on people. As soon as they come out of it, there's going to be, yeah, it just lends itself to meme culture very readily. And I think Cage has realized that he can lean into that, and he's really kind of
It's also about virality, sort of,
having it
right?
up
Just in a kind of
deliberately to
surreal
kind of,
way.
yeah. Another film which has just been out on the Criterion Channel, I think this week, A Fire by Christian Petzold, which I think is his lightest film and most kind of frothy film. And I really enjoyed that. I want to spend an entire movie pretending I'm not in love with Paula Beer while I'm definitely in love with her. And because of that, I'm obnoxious, insufferable, and I have a manuscript that I've called the most outrageous title in the whole world. I don't want to spoil the title of the manuscript, which I think is such a hilarious drop that when he uttered it, I think I audibly gasped and had a laugh. That, oh my god, this is perfect. But yeah, I wish I could spend an entire movie pretending I'm not in love with Paula Beer. That would be perfect. That would, and there's an argument to be made whether Paula Beer or Nina Haas is the bigger muse for Petzold. I think he's delivered his equal best with both of them, and it's fantastic. I love the film. I think in all these,
I vote Haas because my favorite Petzold film is Phoenix. But yeah, no, I think Paula Beer is like luminous and wonderful in A Fire. And she would actually be like she'd be on my wish list for a best supporting actress nomination, though that of course is not going to happen.
no, that's not going to happen. But honestly, in that sensibility, also the use of the song, which is very catchy in my mind by the Warners, so efficiently and expertly used. Exactly, like once you say it out loud, you can't just stop humming it in your brain. And once you've seen the movie, that song is not going to leave your mind because it's going to be in your mind. So yeah, definitely that's Petzold's A Fire, which is currently streaming on the Criterion Channel. Also on the Criterion Channel is the
Good to
Farpanai.
know. I would actually really like to give that another watch. I found A Fire quite enjoyable.
Yeah, yeah. See, this is the other thing. I think it's one of the few genuinely light and frothy movies in our list. So many of them are sort of darkly comic. This is genuinely funny before it has a tonal shift, which,
I mean, yeah, it goes to some pretty dark places as
but
well.
still, I think for by and large, given Petzold's previous filmography, this is
Yes, yeah.
definitely his lightest film in that sense. Another film which is on the Criterion Channel and which I loved, and not only because of what the director has been through already, is Jafar Panahi's No Bears. I cannot for the life of me put my finger on what it is about Panahi that he can make these humanist dramas and make them so efficiently. There is an efficiency to his filmmaking and the kind of moral texture to his stories that really works on a fundamental level. I just cannot, for the life of me, grasp what it is that Panahi's cinema just, he's able to do that time and time again. It's one of those films that has worked in me on a subconscious level, and I have to extrapolate and find out what it's doing to me on a conscious level. But it's speaking to, once again, it's Jafar Panahi. And yeah, I mean, he just keeps making movies in the most. I can't imagine if I can even think clearly if I was under house arrest, let alone, if that kind of a thing. I'm not even saying that he's made a movie. He's made one of the best movies of the year under impossible circumstances. I cannot sort of grasp and convey the gravity of what he's achieved. It's an outside chance and a slim chance, whatever. But despite that, if you have the Criterion Channel, go and watch No Bears. It's,
If I'm not mistaken, I think No Bears was a contender a year ago. I think that was part of the 2022-23 cycle.
oh, okay. Maybe
Maybe. I feel
because
like it was in the
I
mix
ended up seeing it in
for.
the festival circuit here in 2020, in this year at the Sydney Film Festival. I just thought maybe it hadn't played earlier. So unless if that's the
It
case.
may have been, I recall it being in the mix for an international feature I don't even know if it was shortlisted, but I just remember it being thrown around as a possibility in that conversation.
Okay, if that's the case, then that's that. But
Hey, he wasn't getting nominated,
anyway,
regardless,
so
so
this is
it
our
doesn't
wish list.
matter.
So we can change yours as well, because we've already changed.
Sure.
Whatever. So that's kind of my list. That kind of wraps up my wish list in this alternate multiverse of madness.
Two of my favorite movies, two movies I really love this year aren't actually going to be released. I would have at least one of them on like a wish list for directing. Femme is excellent. That premiered in Berlin, and I had a chance to see it at like a local film festival in Brooklyn, but it's slated, I think, for a 2024 release. I'm obviously just stalling with pointless words because I'm looking for the directors. Sam Freeman and Nying Chun Ping. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but yeah, I would nominate them. But again, it's not really this year. Also, Angus MacLachlan for A Little Prayer, which premiered at Sundance. I love that film. But sticking to movies that came out this year or are, slated to come out. Um, Call Me a Simpleton. I love Air. I think Ben Affleck does a great job directing it. I don't know that I'd nominate him, but I just think that movie gets so much shit. I'd be remiss not to mention it. Um, no, I don't think he deserves the nomination, but Infinity Pool was a lot of fun, and I think Brandon Cronenberg really brought a directorial kind of vision and energy to that. But no, like filmmakers, I would actually kind of personally nominate. Nicole Holofcener for You Hurt My Feelings. I'm a fan of her, and I love the movie. I don't know, like you couldn't write a slice of comedy that is more for me. Like that's just my jam.
Did you
Um,
also like No Hard Feelings?
I haven't actually seen it.
Ah,
It's one that I
I
missed.
really love No Hard Feelings, and I seem to be very much in the minority for that film in terms of how much I love it. But it'd be interesting to hear your take on it once you've seen it. This is
I'll
a
check
part
it
of
out on Netflix
the
and we'll talk
feelings
about it.
bubble. If you hurt my feelings, then there's no hard feelings, right? So,
Um, now the next movie I'm going to mention, I don't think it's like great or anything, but I really like the directing. Eva Longoria, who made Flamin' Hot. I just think it has like really good cinematography and again, like a vibrancy and energy that I wasn't expecting. Again, not I wouldn't nominate her probably, but just a director who deserves a debut filmmaker who deserves some props. Okay, but let's really get into who I would like to see get an again, I don't think they're going to get a nomination, but I think they're worthy. Um, George C. Wolfe for Rustin, like you said, there's this great jazzy energy. It's not just the Coleman Domingo show. There's a lot to technically appreciate about that film. I would even argue that in its editing, in some of its like artificial backdropping, it's kind of Fincheresque. And it's funny I say that because I think its script is sort of, by Dustin Lance Black, who won an Oscar for Milk in 2008. I think Rustin has like a Sorkin-esque quality to its writing and a Fincher-esque quality to its filmmaking. Of course, if anyone doesn't, I'm sure everyone understands the illusion I'm trying to make. But David Fincher and Aaron Sorkin, of course, collaborated on The Social Network. In case anyone doesn't know that, but I'm sure you all do. Um, okay, and now here are two that I'm really passionate about. I am a huge Michelle Franco fan. I love Sundown. I think that's one of the very best movies of 2022. It was in my top five a year ago. I think New Order is also great. Chronic is strong, and his new movie Memory, fantastic. He he knows how to frame a shot. Like every moment, there isn't a wasted frame. Whether it's just Jessica Chastain sitting on a bench, like I don't know, his films have like the visual quality of early Denis Villeneuve. I think he's an incredible filmmaker, and Memory is easily one of the best movies I've seen this year. I would personally nominate Michelle Franco. And yesterday I saw Sean Durkin's The Iron Claw,
oh
and
yes.
I don't know it's a very good movie. I don't know if it's very good or great. I'm gonna have to sit with it a little more, but visually it's pristine. Like it's one of the best looking movies I've seen this year. Just the color, the framing choices, the visual variance too. It's not just like the same, impressive set of shots over and over again. Like there's a there's a really eclectic quality to its visual presentation. Yeah, I think easily if I were personally nominating directors, Michelle Franco and Sean Durkin would be in there, regardless of how I feel about the films themselves. And you've already mentioned Chloe Dumont. So yeah, if I'm going to limit myself to five, I'll go for preferences. I'll go Michelle Franco, John Durkin, George C. Wolfe, Chloe Dumont, and then, well, I would personally nominate Blazer, but we're just talking about people who don't have a shot. So yeah, Nicole Holofcener.
I do want to see About Dry Grasses again because I love Chelan, and once again, you see that in the cinema, it works on a subconscious level. I want to see it again to kind of see where it really sits with me because I don't know if it happens to a lot of other people, but this kind of conventional style of criticism where you see something on a Thursday or a Friday, basically first day of release, and you're expected to pump out a review basically that night. I can't do that. It takes me a long time to wrestle with a film, to understand how it's working, not only for me, but how it sits with me. How do I feel about it? And and where it stands in other things I've seen and what it's doing in terms of referencing a historiography of other work that's come before it, and how do I place it in a body of work, not only of the filmmaker's body of work, but also a body of work in the zeitgeist, the kind of films that are coming out in that time. So it's a complex task, which I'm not sure, because obviously the feeling that the time for doing film criticism has passed. I'm not sure if people really.
Yeah, when you get
And
these hot takes on Twitter, and I mean, like, I'll never forget, I saw 1917, when it came out, and as soon as it ended, I mean, I fine to this in to be fair to this person, the movie, is a very flashy piece of directing, but just remember that the person, the movie ended and I needed a bit to decide how I feel about it. And the person in front of me just second you see directed by Sam Mendes turns to the person he's with. That was a cinematic masterpiece. And I'm like, yeah, I guess in a world like that, what is the if we're just so ready to stamp a film and determine its quality and then just kind of go on Twitter and use adjectives and adverbs, it is easy to be discouraged. But that's why we like to take a beat and, like you said, figure out how it fits into the context of a director's body of work, how it fits into a broader social context, and also just to figure out, like, how are the elements of any given film speaking to one another, right? Like, how is the cinematography kind of serving the story? Like, a film isn't just like what's up on screen and the words that come out of an actor's mouth. You really, I'm a proponent of watching things more than once and kind of figuring out, like, how are the different aspects of filmmaking kind of harmonizing to tell a story.
I
It's a
couldn't.
much more satisfying way to review a movie than to just come out and, talk about how you feel. Like, sure, our feelings play a role, but we also just want to be able to break down what is being done before we decide how we feel about it.
Absolutely, I couldn't have put it better myself. And I guess if you were listening to this podcast series, which is now, it's an hour-long podcast, then you also kind of like to take things a bit slow and like to dissect things and want a not a rushed opinion on things, but a considered take on where things are going. Otherwise, you wouldn't be with us for an hour and bit, however long this podcast has been. So if you've been with us, I thank you. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Please tell us your favorite picks for Best Director in this race. If we've missed anyone that you've liked and you think has a decent shot, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know. Let us know your wish list if we've missed out any. If you were to make your own Best Director list, it has to have no rules. You set your own rules. It's your universe. It's that kind of Doctor Strange multiverse of madness. You become the evil Doctor Strange. You get to control everything, and you get to have the battles that you want to have with your favorite directors, battling it out for the top spot. So that's how it is. This brings us to the end of our very first episode of High on Award season. We will be back with our next episode, which will be in this podcast series about all of the acting categories, which we'll be lumping it together so we can have a discussion about all the acting categories, the supporting actor categories, and even if we can in the same episode do best actor as well. So we have all the acting categories in the same episode. So that's what you have coming up next. But this has been Virat Nehru and Ron Meyer in different time zones. Wishing you well wherever you are, whenever you're listening to us. Thank you so much for your time. And we will be back with the next episode